All right, so this is technically the first podcast. Well, we've kind of done them out of order, but this is definitely due to let you guys know kind of what the plan is here, where we want to go with it. You know, this is the first method podcast of many. Many ideas are floating around this crazy mind of mine, and all my amazing friends with their crazy minds. We got enough content here for you guys for a long time. But I encourage you to comment, to leave ideas, opinions, different understandings. You know, we're open. Let's work together on this. So without any further ado,
I would like to introduce
The Method Podcast.
in the background you may hear snoring and wheezing sounds, but trust me, nobody's dying here. It's all right. It's just my two little pit bull terriers hanging out, snoring away, being beasts, having dreams. Zeta's currently on the ground having a dream, running in her sleep. So, you know, they're here to keep me company and soothe you with their snores and wheezing sounds. This is where it all starts. I've been talking about doing a podcast for I don't know how many years, with all the crazy conversation that goes on inside the tattoo shop, and being that my interests lie outside of just drawing, the creation process intrigues me so deep that I love philosophy and all sorts of strange hidden truths and trying to find what the reality actually is, how this plane really works, you know, how we can move seamlessly through it and understand, or just maybe understand how much we really can never understand. The acceptance, you know, moving forward, always trying to be a better person, you know, to open up your consciousness, to move it to the next level. You know, on a day-to-day basis, I get surrounded by some of the coolest people around. We're covering their skin with ink, and the stories that, you know, happen, or the things that people research, and the information that flows, and the inspirational energy you feel in a place where, you know, everybody's accepted and we're just worried about one thing, and that's creating the coolest artwork we possibly can. I've always wanted to do this podcast because these conversations pop up, and, you know, rather than keeping it within the walls of the shop, or just, you know, in these small moments of conversation where inspiration strikes and everything flows and converges into that one moment where it's more like you're picking up on truths and information, but it's coming through in this random moment where, you know, usually it gets lost in memory. We forget about it. We don't write these things down. We don't put them forward. We don't put the conversation out there for other people to think about and reflect upon, so that they can add their perspective upon it and see where it takes us. We live in this wonderful time where, you know, as much as everybody wants to look at things from opposing views, like, you know, the pendulum swing in the opposite direction, everything's bad or everything's good. Neutrally, we have these tools to get this information out, to have a large conversation as a people across the world, you know. How, like, we've never, in our own history, as far as we know, going back, we never had this ability to just instantly, with no excuses, put your information online, to have everybody else have this discussion. So I think it's really important to do this while we can, and the podcast is just a platform for that. All these amazing people that I'm surrounded by, I feel like everybody else should have this conversation too. And that way, walking in the doors of my shop looking for artwork, you know what we're about. You know what I'm about. You know that this isn't just a tattoo shop or an art studio. This is a way of life and a way of progressing forwards and of, accepting people, accepting ourselves, and understanding the creation process. Because believe me, it's not just art. If you're an artist, if you're a painter, what it is it's almost like you're tapping into this framework where you can get tools to create in this reality. And a lot of us keep it closed down and just do one thing. But once you realize these principles that kind of govern all things, you can pretty much jump into whatever you want. And with the right belief, the right feeling, the right thought patterns moving forward, you can achieve anything you want. Because once you realize that at the smallest scale, it's our thoughts that create everything. So if everything's a creation of our thoughts, which, you can put many ideas in the middle there, well, your thoughts create, you think something and then you do that action, and then that action affects the physical world, which therefore affects everybody's physical world in the minute scale and reflects back upon you, your own mind, basically. So whatever way you want to put it together, it all works that way. So once I realized, like as a kid, I never really did well with being taught things, reading books, things like this. Going to school, I felt like I wanted to learn so much, but I wasn't being taught anything. We were being taught theories as if they were reality, but never being given the opportunity to expand our own minds and think upon things in our own way. It's more of memorize this and regurgitate it, which, it's good if that's going to be your job, if you're going to be a drone. But if you want to think apart, if you want to, look outside the box, if you have an alternate perspective than the one they're trying to train into you. Which, on a good note, that keeps some people, it gives people a chance, right? But it depends on what we utilize it for. And in this day and age, I didn't feel I was learning anything. So, dropped out of high school, started welding, working hard. Because in my family, it's, if you're not going to school, you're working, you got to pay your way, you got to do the best you can to work with everyone. So the idea that you need, this schooling to be intelligent doesn't seem to be the actual way. It seems to be if you want inside yourself to learn something, you need to go and learn it. And the only way to learn it is by doing it, immersing yourself upon it. You can read books all day long, but until you actually go and do it, you don't know, right? And I, as a kid, I always wanted to just do things, Let me try. Like, I need to feel it in my hand. I need to do this thing to understand it, to progress with it. So I'd always be drawing, I'd always be making things, inventing stuff. When I was a kid, I was part of the Lego magazine, and there was a contest where you could build whatever thing you wanted for this whatever entry to win whatever Lego thing you wanted. So I, as a kid, just hanging out on my grandma's floor, typical, young kid, imagining the world around you, not not having these constructs that have been buried, like you're buried under these constructs so that you can't actually just blossom forth whatever comes to your mind into your reality. Because as a kid, like, you can make things around you. You know, all of a sudden you're in an ancient temple and there's warriors everywhere. Like, in that state, you know, just made a submarine with a bunch of dudes. I didn't think it was any good, really. Like, it wasn't my best thing that I've ever made, but I took a picture of it, sent it in anyways, because you never know, right? And surprise to me, as this young kid, I won. I was like, what the hell? Like, I didn't even think that was any good. Doesn't make sense. Okay, well, whatever. That's just, now I understand it's just my perception of it. And I got to choose whatever I wanted, any Lego set that you could. And at that time, this is when I, like, you know, all my friends had N64s and stuff like that, and I was on my computer playing and building and designing BMX parts and stuff on AutoCAD for fun. So I liked making stuff that was something that you could actually bring forth and utilize, and it would work, you know. Not that the parts business, you know, worked out at all, but dreams as a kid, right? But what that did is it made me choose, at the Lego contest, I chose the robotic Lego because I was like, sweet, man, like, I can build some robots. It's got little sensors. You just, like, put it together like Lego. That's cool. So I got that, and, you know, at a young age, I was making little robots that run across the floor and chasing my mom, walk, you know, hit a wall, turn around, run away, like rudimentary things. But it's just the love of creating stuff, and I think that's intrinsic in us as humans. That's why you look around and people think we spread like a disease, because we have this intense urge to just shape the world around us. Not that we're doing it in the right way right now. We're not working with the natural laws, but it's this natural thing inside of us. And I think it stems through all avenues, because the same principles that applied in making these things out of Lego apply in how I airbrush, you know, and or how I go about fabricating stuff for my drift cars, whatever, having fun making stuff that, you know, you want something to do something different than what it does, so you build it rather than buy it or, you know, talk about it all day and do nothing. So I learned very quickly that it was by doing that I could learn, but it didn't make sense because there wasn't anybody particularly teaching me. It was just that I felt this, you know, when you have it in front of you and you're doing it, like, I'm sure a lot of people who work with their hands know the same feeling, you know. You know, if you're you can be taught how to weld all day long, but until you actually feel it, you know, just get it in your hands, do it. You can learn amazing things and just be open to failure and taking from that failure and then learning. There, you know, I probably have 90% of the drawings I've ever done are half-finished stacked pieces of paper. They're failures, but from each one I learned and did my best to learn, you know, even though some of us are pretty stubborn and we learn really slow. So from that, growing up, creating, being interested in that, you start to want to understand the creative process, where that comes from. And then when you go down that road, holy crap, it's a rabbit hole. You know, you find all sides of the spectrum, like strange occult dark stuff and occult light stuff and stuff that's before your very eyes every day, like understanding symbols, understanding geometry, frequencies, vibration, you know, magnetism, like not law of attraction, but the law of magnetism, and how we can magnetize ourselves to attract certain things to us. And what magnetizes us is our thought pattern based on that thing, not the opposite of it. So getting the tool in your hands, never using it before, and then having a positive thought to the outcome. is where that power lies, you know? Because if somebody did it once, like especially that's what I look at, you know. If I want to make something, it's somebody did it once. They have hands, they're a human just like me, you know. They may have access to fancier tools, but it has been done. So how can we do it? How can I do it? How can anybody do it? And anybody can. And that's where all this conversation comes into play, is if we all work together, we can really progress and move forward with this, you know. So with that being said, this is the Method Podcast. This is where ideas come to flourish, you know? And everybody's idea on this reality is valid, and we need to take it all into account and understand the underlying details behind it, even if, you know, if you are walking through the world, sometimes when what you get from somebody isn't them, it's you. They're reflecting upon you what you perceive in the world. And with that, technically, you know, you go deep enough inside, and that's everything. That's all. That's you know, what they call God, the all, the, you know, whatever you want to call it, that the force, you know. That's where that is. It's inside you. You know, not you don't have to look outside to do the magic. You just close your eyes, and depending on how you aim your thoughts, it draws to you what you get. Yeah. So when I opened my tattoo shop, it was a few years ago, like 5 years ago. You know, it started out just me and my buddy. Well, a very long time ago, me and my buddy just bought tattoo guns and messed around in his basement tattooing people, and, you know, things you do when you're young and stupid and go about things in the difficult way. But through that, I learned how to tattoo, and I officially wanted to start Method when, you know, I was working a job, not making enough money, because, like, if any, you know, all of you that live in the Lower Mainland understand, the cost of living is quite ridiculous. You know, you need to be making a serious hourly wage to just make it, to have a place to live. If you want to have a garden, man, oh man, you're spending well over $2,000 to $3,000 a month in rent on some dilapidated old shack. And so I wasn't really happy with this job. Like, I was moving up in the ranks. Like, I was getting to the point of where, like, you know, the boss was giving me lots of freedom, letting me build stuff, you know, giving me the shot at, like, working on the fab table, all this stuff. I had proved myself. My hourly wage was going up, but it never seemed to be enough. You know, I had enough money in this system of working 9 to 5 to just basically to pay to keep myself alive so that I can go back to work the next day. Like, what are you working for? You're working in this circle of nothing, this perpetual wheel of you're not accomplishing anything. You're maybe, you know, paying off a house, whatever, credit card debts, blah 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 blah, all these things you sign up for, car payments, cell phone payments, and before you know it, all you're doing is you're basically keeping yourself alive so you can go to work the next day, and then what? You know, it to me, that wasn't fulfilling enough. I wanted to do something. I wanted to create things. I wanted to move forward. And so I quit my job one day, and I was like, no, I had enough. I'm going to make this work for me. instead of, working for it. I'm not going to let the world happen to me anymore. I'm going to happen to it, I'm going to do whatever it takes to work, make money for myself, and progress forward. And I think a lot of people who start businesses kind of get into that fed up state at some point, and it's like, I know that I can do this. I can do this better. I can step above. I can do this. And, all it takes is just doing it. I started by painting cars in my garage. This is the worst location for it ever. It's like a dirt floor barn, so I had to poly off this ghetto spray booth and, taking odd jobs, welding stuff on the side because I had built up a decent amount of tools over the years. Doing whatever it takes, to get by. But my dream was to create for a living. What can I do? What can I create? And what? I was talking to my dad one day. I was like, what? I opened up a tattoo shop out of my house. And I had, a couple friends who I've been tattooing with over the years, and we're all kind of progressing at the same rate and same age, hanging out. So we figured, let's make this work. Let's see what we can do. After, as a lot of people know, going into business with friends is probably the worst thing you can do if you want to stay friends. So, we worked and it didn't really work out that well. People didn't agree on different things. And so, I was left in this house where I'm paying a ton of rent and bills and stuff like that. And so I decided, you know what? It's time to take this to the next level. I don't want to be tattooing out of my house. I want a place where people can come and feel extremely confident. Because, driving up my driveway, into the property and my dog running around outside, it's, it's all right for good friends, but it's not the most professional, experience for somebody getting a tattoo or first time getting a tattoo, something like that. So I moved down to White Rock Beach. And where this is leading to is the first 2-3 years of being down on the beach. It was not easy, and I can remember sitting in my shop being like, okay, so I put myself in this position, so now how do I succeed in this position? How do you get noticed? How do you even get people to walk into your shop? And, I did all the marketing work and progressing forwards, but I had a lot of spare time on my hands. But I had to be at work, and I had to be progressing in some sort of way. You can't just, when you sit there and you have idle time and you don't utilize it for something, even if it's just listening to something where you're learning, I feel like you're going backwards, like you're atrophying, like if you don't use your muscles, they fade away and you turn into like this weird skeleton monster, like. But I worked hard at that and drawing every day, progressing my skills, doing studies on things and failing time and time again in my eyes on drawing skills and what I wanted to create. So it just kept leading to understanding the world. And this is when I took the time to really start to get into my interest in philosophy. Because I was looking up things like, sacred geometry. I'm like, what is this sacred geometry? Everybody talks about it. It's all woo-woo, flower of life, bro. But like, what is it actually? Why does it exist in all these ancient cultures? And why do all the New Age people clamp onto it, but I guess it's just a sales tactic more than anything in that regard. But that's when I first started to really get into these things, to understand, okay, how does this work? Why is it like that? Oh, okay. When you really go into it, these are building blocks for our reality. What is this Fibonacci spiral, and why is it so important? What is this thing? And then I researched it. I'm like, holy cow, now we're really getting into it. We're starting to understand reality and the frameworks of it, how everything in this world grows, how it all works. And that really intrigued me. I was like, wow, this is amazing. Holy crap. If I understand how the world works, in a small regard, definitely not going to say I know it all, that's for sure. I'm still but an apprentice on this, on this journey. Maybe even lower than apprentice, who knows, right? But the understanding that, wow, there's keys of understanding reality, and everything seems to work off of these principles. And okay, well, if everything works generally off these principles, then if I use these principles in my artwork, how can this progress? And then I started to utilize these principles, and I was like, whoa, overnight everything got better. It made more sense. And all it is it's understanding the building blocks of this reality. Well, mildly understanding them, just scratching the surface. But it made my art explode. I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. And every day I'm learning more things, and it seems the more you apply these things, the more it unlocks in your mind of the understanding, which, I'm going to do another solo podcast, probably 4 or 5 in from now, where we'll really cover sacred geometry. I'll have a little video clip that goes with that one, and we can really discuss it. And then I would love to see what your guys' opinions on it is. That's what this is all about. Is really understanding the world together. And everything that I do, don't get me wrong, I don't dogmatize anything. My beliefs aren't set in stone. I do understand things from a certain perspective, but I would like to understand them deeper, and I understand that takes the allowance of changing your reality, allowing something to step into your world and to change your views on everything, and then to humbly be like, okay, well, this is what I think now, and this is how I see things. And even if it contradicts my old belief, that's okay. It's okay to seamlessly move in and out of these understandings, because you're never going to get to the true understanding without it. So going into this, I loved, Nordic mythology. I thought it was cool. Loved the show Vikings. It was one of my favorite shows. But I didn't really know much about it. And I always be putting, since I was a kid, before even high school, I was interested in runes. Why am I interested in runes? It doesn't really make sense, So I didn't even understand. I thought it was just some cool looking writing and, different things like that. And going through and growing up, understanding what they mean and stuff like that. And then really understanding just even the process of casting runes freaks people out, right? That's, holy crap, dude, that's some dark magic divination stuff, man, holy cow. But really what it is it's a reflection of your subconscious, because you can't directly contact your subconscious. It's deep down there, and what it does is, I understand now that what it is it's like, there's really nothing woo-woo or magical, but yet it is magic at the same time. The idea of casting runes is throwing down, stones or piece of wood that have different runes carved into them, and each rune has its own meaning. But it's a very subtle meaning, and it's not a specific meaning. What ends up happening is you cast the runes, you look at the runes that you want, and what happens to you when you see that rune, because of the way that your mind works, is you instantly apply whatever meaning you feel deep down onto that rune. It's not telling you anything specifically. You're telling yourself something through looking at it and being like, oh, that means like, prosper to come. Oh, well, that could be like this thing that, I'm applying for, and it's going to prosper for me, or my mind state and whatever. And all that's doing is you're actually applying, your subconscious is showing its face, basically. It's showing, because you know the truth. You know what you need to do inside, deep down, without all the ego and things built up over time kind of muddying it. You know what you got to do. And I knew what I had to do was continue on this path and understanding these things. So from, sacred geometry to quantum physics, which just the basic principles on. I'm definitely not going to say I understand quantum physics at the, scientific level, but I somewhat understand the principles of it. But all these things led me, and then eventually, because I don't really have a lot of time to be reading because I'm drawing and tattooing all the time. We have these amazing availability in our lifetimes to listen to audiobooks on everything. Everything's been turned into an audiobook. You don't have to read anything. You can be learning stuff all day long. I'll be out in my shop working on something, building something, and I got Manly Hall in the background talking about Atlantis and or different podcasts or audiobooks of old texts. And what I'm doing is the same way that the world, this force that's external to you, the force that seems to, the ruling elite, they call them, some people call it the government. It's, there's a structure in place. And what they do is, constantly barrage you with information that you don't really need inside your head. It starts to fill you up and muddy you up, and in a way it's brainwashing you, because you hear that word enough times, and now it starts to flare up. So you walk past something, you see a story, all of a sudden you remember, oh yeah, I heard that, whatever, this and that. So you go in there, and it's because of the information put at you. So instead of listening to the radio or something where you get all these ads and all this stuff and the repetition of the same few songs over and over and over, where it's actually just training you and dumbing you down, I choose to listen to audiobooks. And holy crap, man, even if you're not particularly listening to it, you're busy working, doing something, I very much believe that little bits of that information still go through. So why not brainwash yourself with the good stuff? Why not brainwash yourself with things you want to know? And that's where, things like what I started to understand and listen to. I listened to this book called The Kabbalion. And I was like, what the hell is this? I was lucky enough to find it on YouTube in a good copy. And it was amazing. I started to see things differently and understand things in a different perspective. And really, really dig deep down. And what it did is it started me on this rabbit hole of information and understanding. I'm not saying that I am a hermeticist or whatever, but I'm saying that I listen to all sides of the story. I grew up, my grandfather and grandmother are Christian, like big time Christian. I don't know what classification you'd call him specifically, but my grandfather's one of those few who actually follow what Jesus said in the Bible. Not they're not part of the religion per se, but they're with the Christ, vibration, that self-sacrificing, doing good just for good sakes, and loving thy neighbor and all that stuff, and the understanding that comes with it. So I had that growing up, but I was lucky enough that my parents, they were just kind of like, whatever, it's your choice what you want to believe and this and that. So I never had it shoved down my throat. So I had a perspective of it, but it wasn't forced. So it made me more open to everything else, and I've listened to all sorts of stuff, like on Buddhism and all perspectives. Like, the idea here is we understand, and to understand you can't just read one book and then be like, this is it, and it's like, no, what you gotta do is you gotta look at all pieces of the information, and then inside yourself what's right. That subconscious is there, just like when you cast the runes and it told you exactly what you've known all along. What is right. Inside, deep down, unless you're like a sociopath, which, those exist. People are broken. But the average person knows what is right and what is wrong. And what is true deep down, if you really listen to yourself, which we don't do enough these days. The idea is to take all the information and see the overarching themes throughout. Because, I really started to see that really everybody's talking about the same thing. Generally, if we took out the names and the dogmatic beliefs and the books and our tribalism, we could have a quite the discussion, that's for sure. But the book, The Kybalion, sent me on a trail into alchemy and hermeticism and Egyptian mythology, basically, is what it comes from. It's the generality of the mystery books, or the mystery schools, and what, just going to pull it up here, and I'd like to kind of go over the 7 hermetic principles. When you think hermetic, it's interesting. Different people have different kind of reactions to that, and it's just listen to the principles, and you'll understand that it doesn't matter, because who it doesn't matter who wrote the book. It doesn't matter really any of the politics around it. That if the information in it is something filled with light and positivity in a reality, like a real kind of way that can be utilized in your life, that isn't going against natural law, is good. Just same as the Bible. If you took all of the religion, the overarching kind of stink that's been put onto it, and you just took the story, just the information, you lost all the names, that's where it matters, is that information that you take from it. So the idea with the Kybalion is it talks about, just a note here, the idea is the Kybalion is written by, I think it's the three initiates, or is this one straight up a Hermes Trismegistus, which is basically, I think it's a Greek or Greek or Roman kind of spin on Thoth from Egypt, which is basically like the embodiment of mysticism, of your thought, of the ability to go within and understand. And the 7 principles are the principle of mentalism, the principle of correspondence, the principle of vibration, the principle of polarity, the principle of rhythm, the principle of cause and effect, the principle of gender, And, let's go through them right now. The principle of mentalism. The entire universe exists in the cosmic mind. The mental sphere of each person extends throughout the entire cosmos and reaches the furthest stars. This is the cause whereby we see, hear, and feel all this is created. This is the reason why we can see the most remote stars. Our thoughts are not locked up in our cranium. Our mind extends throughout the entire cosmos. Our mind penetrates everywhere. Worlds, suns, people, and things. Everything is within the mind of each man. And that's exactly what we were discussing earlier. The idea that even if your physical body is on this physical plane, you're only experiencing your own mind the whole time. Like our delusions are ridiculous. And, I've got caught in them. Everybody does. Nobody's perfect. That's why they talk about us all being born into sin. We don't even have a chance, especially with, how we've been created. So these principles follow throughout, and I utilize that because I never would have opened my shop. I'd never draw anything if I didn't understand that it's the principle of mentalism. If I can create anything in my mind, in my head, you take that and add to the equation hard work and the doing of it, and that's where it all comes into play, And we'll discuss these things in detail through the podcast. These are just pieces of understanding. This is just one side. We're going to have a podcast coming up I did with my grandfather, and it's spectacular. If you look at it from the understanding of an open mind, the idea is his teaching is what he reads in the Bible, and he understands from that. And he almost, the way he explains is he almost uses it like you'd use runes. You go with an intention, and you say, okay, well, what can I learn from this? What is this got to show me today? Who's trying to, what is the universe, the all, trying to show me with this specific text today? And reads it and gets, a specific understanding from it for that specific time. And it's quite spectacular if we open our minds and, open our hearts and allow ourselves to listen to different perspectives, to understand how all this stuff corresponds, because we're all human. And if we're all human, that means that there's a huge chance that all this information is just different versions of the same stuff, because we're all just different versions of the same type of being, right? The next hermetic principle is the principle of correspondence. So it's the as above, so below, as below, so above thing. The idea that everything small is a small version of what is large, and what is large is a large version of what is small, and goes infinitely small and infinitely large, the same way that, planets revolve and they reflect to the molecular level. Not exactly the same, but always a smaller version of the same, using the same principles all the way down and all the way up. That's why Sir John Dee was talking to macrocosmic angels, that whole weird kind of calling things from the other side. Usually the idea is they're trying to contact something that is either microcosmic, so it's inside, it's like the bacteria inside of you, or the things living inside the bacteria, infinitely smaller. Or the other way around, you're trying to contact the thing larger than you, the thing that you take part inside of. It's like the bacteria inside of you trying to talk to you and being like, hey man, like trying to have some sort of even general understanding of something like that, which is, we've found, very difficult to impossible. But with that understanding, I think of it as if you want to stop all wars, fight it on the home front, If the macrocosmic idea is like a war and negativity and fighting and horrible vibration across the world, how do you counteract that? Well, you don't counteract it from the big front because none of us have enough money to do that, right? So you counteract on the small front. So everybody you meet every day, use those principles. Be open. Allow people to be there, be present, and fight the fight on the home front. So the microcosmic level. So if you shift, just like like the butterfly effect, you do one little thing and it changes everything. It ripple through time. And the idea is that's what we got to do. We have to follow through and do the things now that will set forth our reality in the direction that we want it to go. And in the giant being that we take part in, if you want it to move to the left, you generally move yourself to the left to get it to draw closer. That's that other idea of magnetism. So if we're connected to it and it's connected to us, and it affects us and we affect it in our movements and judgments and doings every day, then that's how we change it all. We change it all on the small scale. Because you change enough things on the small scale, it changes the whole world, just even everybody's thinking. If everybody changed their perception of the world, we could drastically change this place, and it's what we're making it this right now, and the people in power they understand that, so they're utilizing everything they can to continue this direction. But it's not. We have absolutely all the power in our decisions every day. Nobody's perfect, and I think that's our problem. We're all too screwed up, and we all have the eternal, the pendulum swing back and forth, which seriously affects our ability to do things, which is one of the other hermetic principles that we will reach in a second. But we're at the principle of vibration. So that's the understanding, that when you go to sleep and you just can't sleep and everything, you feel like you're just vibrating, or, nothing ever stops moving. And, that's when people take certain psychedelics, everything moves and they get sick because it's, they see everything moving forever and it's always vibrating and melting and moving. But it's because that's what it is. That's all we do. We vibrate on certain frequencies, and that's why things feel hard, is because we're vibrating at a different frequency than that specific thing. The planets revolve around suns, and many of them turn on their axes. The suns move around great central points, and these are believed to move around still greater, and so on, and an infinitum. The molecules of which the particular kinds of matter are composed are in a state of constant vibration and movement around each other and against each other. The molecules are composed of atoms, which likewise are in a state of constant movement and vibration. The atoms are composed of corpuscles, sometimes known as electrons, ions, etc., which also are in a state of rapid motion. Everything's vibrating, always, we're always, everything's moving forever. It's like, when you look at somatics, that's some cool shit, man. certain frequencies make specific patterns and shapes, and that's where some of the sacred geometry comes in effect, because you can draw a certain pattern geometrically perfect, and you can create that same pattern with a specific frequency of sound in a specific key. And when you have these things vibrate and you see the sand moving around, and all of a sudden you see the sand, it'll start going in spirals and moving in certain directions around itself, and you kind of instantly get these ideas that, holy crap, that's everything. That's, when you think about it, that's the whole universe moving. That's how, like, if the earth is one piece of sand, and we're all vibrating around in these specific orbits, and it's all just vibration and frequency and the cosmic sound, and that's where all the creation myths start, with the word, the sound, the thought. It's a vibration, and once it starts other vibrations, and then goes from there forever. And on to the next principle of polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. Everything has two sides. Everything has an opposite. Yin and yang is an ancient Taoist teaching to explain duality in the universe. So when you look at that yin-yang symbol, you see the black and the white. But then inside the black, there's a dot of white, and inside the white, there's a dot of black. And that's showing that everything is a polar opposite, but at its essence, it is the same. So the white has black in it. It is the same. It's just a varying degree of the two things. And that's where you get that pendulum swing. That's where you get that constant ebb and flow of our reality and our emotions. Like, if you're super sad, well, actually, I think a lot of people don't understand this. If you're upset, if you're depressed, you can be damn sure that the next one's going to be happy or elevated, or depending on your specific scale of vibration or the swing of the pendulum, it may be quite rapid, and people fluctuate back and forth so ridiculously, and what it does is it traps you, and you're always swinging back and forth, but you're never in control. You're letting the magnetics of the world pull you around, rather than realigning yourself as a magnet and pulling the world to yourself. And understanding that you have as much control, or you have complete control over this, over yourself, over what you choose to experience, So, next one, principle of rhythm. And I feel the principle of rhythm and the principle of polarity kind of go hand in hand, because you have two ends of the spectrum, but then you also have like this wave that goes back and forth, that flows in and out, and that's the principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. There is rhythm and cycles in nature. The tides, the seasons, birth, growth, and death. The repetition of everything means that if we wait long enough without change, the same things will come to repeat themselves. The pendulum of life, of our emotions, thoughts, circumstances, will continue to swing until we begin to observe ourselves honestly and make efforts to change internally. And that's exactly the way I look at it. Is it's like a triangle, right? And both sides of the pendulum are the bottom two corners of the triangle. And it swings back and forth on that bottom plane. And the only way to actually, bring yourself off of that, constant back and forth, is to go to the top of the triangle and look down. And then you're like, well, this is actually pretty simple. Okay, well, that's, and it's like the simplest, hardest thing to do. Like, things happen to me on a daily basis, and I try to remember these principles in how I react to them, because if I get super upset, then I know that, oh man, I've launched that pendulum the one way, and it's going to swing, and then it's harder to slow it down and to stop it than it was to keep it relaxed, moving slowly back and forth. And, there's rhythm and cycles and everything, tides, seasons, birth, growth, death. And I notice that there's rhythms in the world, in the business world. It's funny because there's one they talked about at this business school I went to. They call it the Universal Challenge Line. And it's that difficult point, just before you succeed. And a lot of people give up there, and then they don't make it to success, and they don't understand why. And it was this last hurdle, this last thing, this last difficulty, and it came out of nowhere. It doesn't make sense. And what that is it's almost like, it's like when you create a wave, and that wave comes back to you, and now you're experiencing the opposite ripple of your initial movement out into the waters. Which, if you just keep going past the wave, it's calm sailing, and it keeps going up and down. And that's kind of the way I look at that. And it really helps to, even if you're just tricking your mind, tricking yourself, the way that you think, makes life a lot easier when you know that if you're in a bad situation right now, that the only thing that can come out of that bad situation, or that, not bad situation, I can't say that. It's more the bad feeling. Feeling bad. Negative feeling. Not feeling good. Just as you know that the sun comes up every day, that feeling will change. It may go back, while you're in that state, you'll look at it and be like, oh, well, even if I get happy, I'm just going to be back here again. And, you got to transmute that, man. You got to do that internal alchemy. You got to be like, okay, well, if I can think that way, that means that when I'm in the happy state, or the good vibration, I know that there's going to be a negative one coming. So I can start to foresee this, and I can start to slow the swing down and not react. Choose to react differently, and choose to be more calm and move through the life seamlessly, and not have it beating you up and pushing against it and having roadblocks all the time. Because once you realize that those roadblocks are a wave, that means they're not blocking you anymore. You can, a wave can crash against you. You just have to be, you have to become, you gotta surf the wave, bro. You gotta go with it, move with it. And the next one, which is one that, everybody has problems with. It's the hardest one to really look at, because this is the simplest way to explain everything on a daily basis. This is what people would call karma. This is I think more the reality of it, from my understanding. The principle of cause and effect. The simple principle of cause and effect. So you create a cause and there will be an effect. The same as that pendulum swings. When you do something, there will be an effect. When you're bad to somebody, or you're a terrible person, or you're angry and this and that, it will cause something, maybe even years down the road, but it's caused a chain of events, and they will come back to you. I've made mistakes in my past, and they've come back to me. But the thing is you learn, is if you understand that this is a test coming to you to learn from, to move forward, to refine your soul, to chisel away that granite and make it smooth, it's easier to move through. The majority of people are carried along like the falling stone, obedient to environment, outside influences and internal moods, desires, etc., not to speak of the desires and wills of others stronger than themselves. Heredity, environment, and suggestion, carrying them along without resistance on their path or the exercise of the will. moved like the pawns of the checkerboard of life. They play their parts and are laid aside after the game is over. But the master, knowing the rules of the game, rises above the plane of material life and places themselves in touch with the higher powers of their nature, dominate their own moods, characters, qualities, and polarity, as well as the environment surrounding them, and thus become movers in the game instead of pawns. Rising above, understanding that when you do something, there's a reaction. So if you choose to do things instead of having things done unto you, you can choose what the effects are. The masters do not escape the causation of the higher planes, but fall within the higher laws, and thus master circumstances of their lower planes. They thus from a conscious part of the law, instead of being blind instruments while they serve the higher plane, they rule on the material plane. That's here. Let me find this quote here. My grandfather gave me. It was awesome. Came out of nowhere. I don't even remember what we're talking. I think I was subtly suggesting these principles in something we were talking about, and he told me. It was just such a perfect little. Let's see if we can find it. Here it is. The eagle soars above the storm, not in it. It's a simple concept, man. Be like the eagle. If you see the storm coming, don't just fly into it, fly above it. Watch it unfold beneath you. Because, really, if your spirit is trained well enough, you can rise above it all. You can exit out and be like, hey, I'm checking this out from a higher perspective. So that means that it's not that you're elevating yourself above people like you're better than them or something, but you're elevating your understanding and looking at it from a place where you're not allowing emotions to muddy your understanding of something or your reaction to it, Okay, so the next principle is the principle of gender. Freak people out nowadays. They're all screwed up with that understanding at the moment. The word gender is derived from the Latin root meaning to beget, to procreate, to generate, to create, to produce. A moment's consideration will show you that the word has a much broader and more general meaning than the term sex. The latter referring to physical distinction between male and female living things. Sex is merely a manifestation of gender on a certain plane of the great physical plane. The office of gender is solely that of creating, producing, generating, etc. And its manifestations are visible on every plane of phenomena. It is somewhat difficult to produce proofs of this along scientific lines, but the idea here basically is saying that everybody has two poles. Everybody is both male and female. We have both aspects in us, every single one. That's why you look at all these weird, alchemical and hermetic drawings and paintings of these strange two-headed beings, or you have the two snakes and people are like, ooh, the snakes, oh my god, it's scary, that's it's evil or something. But what it is it's two halves of yourself, two halves of a whole, the him and the her. Because you have a creative side. We're all split down the middle. We're dualistic. We have both things. Our brain is in two pieces. We have one side that is creativity, that is the feminine, the understanding, the feeling side. And then we have the logic side, the male side, the get shit done side, And most times we are fighting ourselves all the time. One side is fighting the other side. The Cain and the Abel story, used as a metaphor. Cain is the black snake, Abel is the white snake. And at that point, one snake killed the other, which means that you killed a side of yourself. You've completely separated from the natural laws of things, the natural order and way things happen. And it's about bringing those two sides together. It's always about finding that middle ground. Being in the center of the swing of that pendulum. And, with these principles, I think they're really interesting. Take for it what you will. I utilize them on a daily basis. I don't look at it as a religion or a belief structure. It's just one piece of information, one understanding that we can utilize to move forward and to build upon our constructs and our beliefs and realities, and we can mold this to something great if we all just understand how. And at this time, we need to have a new renaissance. And this is where it's going. This is what we use this stuff for. We don't let the internet, we don't let cell phones, we don't let Facebook use us for it, At any point, you can choose what you want to put in and what you want to take out from stuff, what you want to perceive from it. And I think that's the goal. I think that's where this podcast is going. So, if you guys are interested in this kind of weird stuff, be sure to stay tuned and see what we're doing and take part. You can check out my tattoo shop at www.methodtattoo.com. But it's so much more. This is a place for creation. It's like the temple of understanding. I love doing art, drawing, and we're going to be releasing YouTube videos of tutorials and ideas so that we can have them built upon, so we can all move forward together and collectively create the reality that we want, the direction we want this thing to go. And with that being said, have a good night, everybody.